Welcome back, Mommas. Today we are excited for this episode. We have Dyer here, and funny how we met. We actually met Megan at the gym. We were all sitting in the sauna, and she had a t-shirt on that talked about prayer. And Nikki had said, "Hey, I like your shirt." And then we just ended up talking the entire time. And my self-pleasing or people-pleasing self was like, "Oh gosh, this poor girl, we've just been chatting the whole time. I wonder if she's like, oh my gosh, I came in here to relax." No, but it's been fun, and we've seen her at the gym multiple times. And then we heard someone told us anonymously that we just had to hear her testimony and had to have her on a podcast. And so here she is.
And it's kind of exciting because most of the time, one of us, Samantha or I, know the story. So this one, neither of us know the story, and we love that. We would prefer it just to be live on the podcast. But yeah, we're so excited to have you here today. Do you want to start with an intro, maybe where you grew up, how many kids you have, anything that you think is interesting from...
Sure.
How you met your husband?
Yeah. Okay.
My husband is amazing. So between the two of us, we have 8 kids. We are a blended family.
Crazy.
Yeah, I know.
You're a saint.
No, not even close. It is, but by the grace of God that we do that every day. But we are very, very blessed. We have 3 kids together. And I am super fortunate to be able to work in recovery. That's really my big backstory is a story of recovery, of redemption. And meeting my husband was actually part of that whole way that God just worked in my life and brought me to him. It was very much a prodigal son story. It's funny. I always wonder, where do I start? Because I mean, literally I can think back to being a small child and parts of my childhood that then later played a role in where I ended up, how I got where I was, and then my path back to the Lord. I don't know. Should we just dive right in?
Yeah. Go.
Yeah, we've Samantha's prayed before the podcast, and Megan said, "Hey, I'm not going to prep for this podcast, and we're just going to go where God leads us." So this is what we're doing, and I think I'm so encouraged. I can't wait to hear it.
I hope that I can do it in a succinct amount of time. That's what I'm praying for, Lord, to give me the right words to not take forever, because I can tell the story in a really long way. So I guess really the beginning of all this is my relationship with the Lord. I was really fortunate to always know who God was. There was never a time in my life when I did not know who God was. And as a very small child, I remember my dad telling me, like, well, Jesus is always with you. You know, God's always with you. And so I would, probably like 3 or 4, right? Saving a space for Jesus in my bed. Like, this pillow is for Jesus. And this is the blanket for Jesus. Cause that in my young mind, like literally interpreted it that way. But that was one thing my dad did right by me growing up. His family was Baptist, and his grandfather was a preacher. And I actually come from a really long line of Christians. And it's really funny seeing how that played out later. Like, I fully believe that my great grandparents, like, I know they prayed for me.
Oh,
and I know
gosh,
that
I say the same thing.
It's so cool to see that too, about how, and I need to remember to do that as well, to pray for the future generations in my family. My dad's mom, I know, prayed for me throughout my life, and she'd given me a copy of The Purpose Driven Life when I was in high school. And when we get to me being in high school, you see I was a hot mess. Explains why grandma wanted to give me that book. But it wasn't until I got sober, and maybe a year or 2 in, I went to go read that book. And because I knew I had a copy of it, and I opened it and I saw that it had been given to me by my grandma. I had completely forgotten.
How long afterwards?
Oh, this is like probably 10 years or more after she'd given me the book that I went back and read it. But those seeds, God, I love how he does that. He plants those seeds. He lays the foundation in the beginning, and all of that just played out into, again, this redemption story. So growing up, I was an only child, which is crazy, right? Because I have 8 kids. How do you go from being an only child to 8 kids? But I was an only child, and my parents they fought all the time, and it was challenging as a kid. And my dad was very, very affectionate, but he also had an alcohol use disorder. And so there was just this not knowing, which version of dad I was going to get. And my mom, because of the turmoil of their marriage, was very emotionally distant. So I think I had this need for attention and affection that I feel like wasn't fulfilled for me as a kid. And that led me down this path of really needing to be accepted by my peers. I remember being in elementary school and just being, really like obsessed with it, like wanting to be part of, wanting to be included, wanting to be one of the cool kids. Yeah. And I was really awkward in elementary school and started to, I lost some of the baby weight and all that stuff when I started to get into middle school and met some new friends and kind of became sort of coming into my own, but I was really searching for my identity. And I had my own likes and interests, very particular ones. I loved reading. I loved Pokemon, which I'm 36 and I still get down on some Pokemon Go. So I'm not too proud to admit that. But that stuff, if it wasn't cool at school, then that wasn't me. Like I was the chameleon. I would change my likes, my interests, the way I dressed, everything to be to be like the cool kids. And my parents divorced when I was 13, when I was going in, I think probably was that 6th or 7th grade, I don't know, somewhere beginning of middle school. And that was kind of the beginning of like this downward spiral for me. I felt very lost in the world at that time. And my only recourse was to really lean on my friends and my family, my cousins. My mom's side of the family is Cuban, right? And so like, if you know anything about Hispanic culture, everybody's involved in everybody's life and everybody's business and very close. And so my cousins were more like siblings for me. So even though I was an only child, my cousins and I were really close. And my cousin Mikey was 3 days younger than me. I was born October 29th. He was born November 1st.
We have the same birthday. Did we already
We did. That? Isn't that awesome? So happy birthday coming up soon, not too long. But so we were like thick as thieves, and around the 7th grade age, he and I were hanging out all the time. And both of us were kind of in this place of like wanting to find our spot in the world. And we both discovered that we were really good at drinking. My dad was a recovering alcoholic. So was his dad, and they would drink together. So that was like this is a generational thing. Mm-hmm. But that was, I remember the summer of my 7th grade year, we partied as much as humanly possible. And I remember one of the guys telling me, wow, you drink better than the guys do. Like I could, outdrink them under the table. And that was all I needed to hear, was that I was good at that. Right? Yeah. It did. It felt great. And so that was going to be my identity. That was going to be my identity. So when I went back to my school, and began seeking out those people who were the partiers, and, naturally they were the burnouts, right? They were the most accepting crew. Right. But, sure. It's crazy how fast I went downhill from there. I started, by the time I was 15, 16, I was, had a full alcohol use disorder. I was smoking cigarettes on a regular basis, smoking weed on a regular basis. And I learned also that it was this way of coping with my feelings. Think of any 14-year-old girl, 15-year-old girl that the emotions are high. They're all over the place. Go back to that. No, me neither. Yeah.
How often were you drinking? Were you drinking daily or weekend binges, or? It
was definitely weekend binges. And that's actually a really good question, because a lot of people assume that an alcoholic is defined by, like they drink every day. And that is not it. What defined me as an alcoholic at that age was not how often I was drinking. It was what was happening when I was drinking. If I had one sip, I was not going to stop until I either ran out, was blacked out, whatever. Like I could not stop myself. I was never one of those people who could just have one drink. So there's a saying in the rooms of recovery that I heard that always resonated with me that how does it go? I didn't get, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget it now.
Do I need to Google it?
It was like something like I didn't get in trouble every time I drank, but every time I drank, or every time, I don't even know. Forget that. Basically, every time that I drank, I got myself into trouble. It was nearly every time. And by my sophomore year in high school, I'm pretty sure it's my sophomore year. Yeah. So by my sophomore year in high school, I was sneaking out at night to like go party with friends. And one night I just way overdid it. I drank an insane amount and somehow made it back into my house. And I grew up in Eureka, and it's beautiful out there, right?
Yeah.
But
very windy roads.
Very windy roads, and the terrain is very rocky, and the fact that I even made it back to my house was insane.
Were you driving?
I was not driving. I had friends that I was driving with, but I was in the back of a pickup truck.
Oh, wow.
And I had tried to jump out of that pickup truck on more than one occasion. I think that's why they put me in the back of the pickup truck, is because I was so wasted. But anyway, so I get home, and it was the middle of winter, and I don't remember really getting home, but I had gone like through the basement up to the main level of my house and apparently passed out. And I woke up to my dad like crying. When my parents divorced, I stayed with my dad, and he was like screaming my name, and I was soaking wet, and like my cheeks kind of hurt because he'd been trying to wake me up for like a while. And so, smacking my cheeks and dumping cold water on me and like doing whatever he could. And then at that moment, I don't know why, but in my brain, it was, okay, I'm caught. So I guess the only solution is I just got to end this right now. So I locked myself in the bathroom with a knife and tried cutting my wrist. And if you knew me when I was sober, I would never, ever, ever try to take my own life or do something to hurt myself in that way. But when you're under the influence of alcohol, you're a different person. I mean, I really was. So at that point, that was the first time I went to rehab. My dad took me to rehab at St. Anthony's in South County. And my mom said, okay, your party time with your dad is over. You're moving with me to Granite City.
So prior to this time, did they know that you were drinking, or was this the first time that it was brought to their attention?
That is a great question. So my dad knew I was drinking. In fact, I would drink with my dad on a regular basis. And I even had one of those moments, one of those affirming moments with my dad over alcohol. I remember he was drinking shots of whiskey, and I asked if I could have one. And this was probably 14, somewhere around there. And I took the shot, and I took it straight faced. And he goes, wow, I know grown men who can't do that. And I was like, oh, now I got daddy's seal of approval. So that was another part. It played a part in my need to drink all the time, to feel like I was special, to feel like I was important, to feel loved, because, they say it's a social lubricant, right? And I would be the life of the party. It was, or at least I thought I was. I could have been thinking I was having this amazing time, and people are like, this chick, which probably happened more often than not, actually. But the way that I felt when I was drinking, it was like all of the awkwardness and the self-consciousness and the fear of what people are thinking of me, it all went away. I had courage. I was funny. And and I got the attention that I wanted. It was filling this hole, at least I thought it was, inside of me. And so after I went to rehab this first time, I moved in with my mom in Granite City. And Granite City there's a lot of great people in Granite City, but the drug use and the alcohol use in that town it's crazy. It was like out of the frying pan and into the fire. And so it didn't take long before I met the same kind of people with those same interests, and what little bit of sobriety I had gained, it was out the window. And so I spent, it was the same story all over again. I found people who, were impressed with my abilities, and it was the next hardest thing to try. Like, it wasn't any one specific drug really that I was addicted to. It was anything. I wanted to try anything that would change my state of mind and get me out of where I was.
Subconsciously?
I think it was both. I think some of it was subconscious. I don't think I understood really the reasons why I didn't want to feel, but I knew that I didn't. Yeah. And I don't know. I wanted to be part of, and that to me at the time seemed like that was the key. So wherever you go, there you are, right? All the baggage and all the problems, everything that I had, I brought with me to Granite City. And, within a year and a half or so, like I was kind of in the same boat where I had partied too hard, burned so many bridges, and ended up going back to Eureka and then back to Granite. It was this cycle.
Was your mom aware of it?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, my mom knew. Oh, my gosh, my mom knew. I would steal her alcohol. And I was one of those kids who would take like her gin or her vodka and put water in it. My mom's like, if you're going to take it, then just take it. Don't ruin the whole bottle. Like, sorry, Mom. I think I probably owe her a bottle of gin.
Do you think we wouldn't notice? So dumb.
Yeah.
It made sense in my 17-year-old mind at the time, right? I was like, this is sure. Why not? But it was the same thing. I was sneaking out there too when I was in Granite. And this one time, my mom, if you met my mom is pretty scary. She's 4'11", but she's pretty scary.
I can imagine.
And she's 100% Cuban. Okay.
Yeah.
So we had, our house was built in the 70s. And so like the windows weren't low to the ground. They were like high up. Like they were like the rectangle windows. And I'm trying to sneak out, and I had my legs like dangling out of my window, and I'm like holding on like this, and I'm getting ready to drop down and go hang out with my friends, and my mom opens my bedroom door.
Oh gosh.
And sees me there like this in my window. And I had to make the decision, like, do I just drop and run and go party all night with my friends and deal with this later, or do I come back inside and deal with my mother? And I went back inside and dealt with my mom.
I just dropped my necklace. Let me crawl back in.
Yes.
No excuses for that.
No, there's not. But I think just like any mom would, I was such a test. Like I tested her so much
Did you not fear her enough to? I mean, I can relate a lot to your story, to be honest. But did you not fear her enough to, like, was the punishment not good enough? Is there anything your parents could have done? I guess there might be moms listening out there, and maybe they have a kid that is choosing this. Is there anything your parents could have done differently, or was it just your willpower?
So at this point, so from a parent's perspective, all the consequences in the world didn't seem to matter. My mom had this Chevy Malibu that she was going to give me, and she said, if you get in trouble one more time, I'm not giving you the car. And you'd think that would have been enough for me to be like, okay, I need to get my stuff together. No, it wasn't. Honestly, I think that what would have helped, and bless my mom's heart, she didn't know this,
right.
But what would have helped would have been if my mom would have been able to help me identify at that time why I felt the need to live my life this way. Mm-hmm. Sure. Because had I identified that then, I could have dealt with all those emotions and the hurt and the things I was carrying and these needs for acceptance and affection. I would have been able to address those, but we don't know what we don't know. Yeah. And, I don't fault my mom for that at all. But I mean, gosh, it took me getting sober to really realize that. And it was through Jesus that I was able to have those revelations. It was wasn't in a psychiatrist's office or anything like that. It was through the Lord. And my mom was, I think she's brought up Catholic. I don't know. But my mom was not a very religious person. My dad believed in God, but he wasn't living his life.
Bless you.
Bless you.
She tried.
I was trying to be quiet.
my dad always believed in God, but he is also a prodigal son story. Like he wasn't living his life for the Lord. So he also, and he had his own battles of addiction that he was dealing with. He couldn't help me sort through that any better for myself than he could for himself at that time. But so I went in this cycle of going from Granite City to Eureka and ended up dropping out of high school my senior year, which is crazy. Like I was the academic. That was one of the things. There's a handful of things that were like my identity, right? It was theater. I loved theater. Orchestra. Played the violin since I was 9. Loved it. And I was one of the smart kids.
So you went like both sides.
Oh,
played
yeah.
both sides. Like goody kid.
Yes.
And wild child.
Yes. And what's funny is that all of the kids, like, so I was in all the honors classes, AP classes, and I was known as like the wild child in that group. So like it was, I don't know, but it was never a question in my mind of if I'm going to college. It was when I graduate, when I go to college. I did really well in school. I had good grades for a time. Once it got really bad towards the end, things started to slip. And then it's actually when I eventually dropped out. I moved out of my mom's house. I was couch surfing with friends my senior year of high school and ended up getting pregnant. And it's crazy. Like, oh gosh, I have so many of these times in my life, just only a handful, when I can say like I audibly heard the voice of God. Like you just hear him, like, and I remember right after finding out I was pregnant, the thought of abortion crossed my mind. And God said, "You're having this baby." And I was like, okay. And I was 18, living my life the way I was. Like that was the last thing I needed at that time. But, I just got chills thinking about that. But it was... God knew what I needed at that time in my life. And it's funny, obviously I'm 18, I'm not married. It was not his timing per se. But the Lord takes the things that the enemy intends for evil and he turns them for good. And I think that includes the stuff that we do, the mistakes that we make. And I think this was one of them. My son was a huge blessing to me. He really was. And this is what's funny. So I'm 18, I'm pregnant. Obviously I have to stop drinking and smoking weed and getting high, like it's like it was the end of the world, right? But my mom, bless her heart, she's like really was doing what she could to try to keep me on the straight and narrow. Like, you're going to have a kid. You got to get your crap together. And so my family, I remember them commenting at this time that, wow, you are so nice when you're pregnant. Like everybody, people always say when pregnant women are just so awful and emotional and all these things. But not you. You're like the nicest pregnant person. And I was like, yeah. Looking back now, I'm like, duh, it's because I was sober. like that was the thing. So that was probably the first time in my life that I'd had this long stretch of sobriety. And when I first had my son, I was 19 when he was born. This is 2007. And actually towards the end of my pregnancy, I was so blessed that Rockwood School District, this was back in Eureka, they had this program called the GED option program. And it was for students like me who didn't graduate. But it would allow them to study to get their GED, but then they would still give them a diploma. That would be your way of finishing high school. 'Cause I was a few classes away from graduating. It was really stupid, but I was so blessed to be able to go through that program. And a few months after my son was born, he's born in May. Actually, it wasn't even a few months. A few weeks after my son was born, I was able to walk and graduate high school, which that was a huge deal. Do
you know Samantha had a teen?
Oh, did
Same
you really?
story, yeah. Senior, I got pregnant at 17, had him at 18. Thankfully, I was in all the honors classes, did 0 hour, like super nerd. And then I was able to my senior year, I only had to go 3 hours and then graduated at semester, had him in February and then walked with my class.
That's awesome.
It was, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
really
there's a
cool.
lot of similarities to our
And
story.
it's Landon is
Same
such a
thing.
blessing.
Yes,
too.
same
I mean,
thing. Like, I would not be the person that I am today. Like, totally changed my world for the better. Thought that it was flipped upside down and God's plan. Yeah.
I actually relate to that a lot. And I did think that my life was over. Like, that's how I interpreted it at that time, that everything, the whole trajectory that I had planned for my life of going to college and being a journalist and all this stuff that I wanted to do, I thought having a kid, I was like, this is it. This is the nail in the coffin for me. And I wish somebody would have told me otherwise back then, because I think I would have chased my dreams, pursued, my ambitions a lot differently than I did.
Like, don't lose hope. You can
Yeah.
still
You can still do it even with a
Absolutely.
kid on your hip.
Your
Yeah.
child's gonna be the greatest joy, the cliche stuff. Like, no, listen. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I went to community college, and, so I tried really hard, especially after my son was like firstborn, to get to keep my stuff together and to be a mom. But I was 19 and I still wanted to go hang out with my friends and party and do things that 19-year-olds do. So there was like this weird dichotomy of like teen mom, teen. And after a few months, my son was only a few months old, and I started the same stuff, started drinking, sneaking out even. And I lived with my mom and my stepdad at the time. And there was one night that I snuck out to go drink with my friends. Aiden was asleep in his crib, and I ended up blacking out at my friend's house and woke up at like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and had my stepdad not checked to see if Aiden would like to check on us before he left for work. My mom was already gone. Aiden would have been home by himself, just little baby by himself in his crib, waiting for me to come. I mean, that's just, I hate that memory. Absolutely hate it. And it's funny. We talked earlier about how it's so weird having a senior in high school. Aiden's a senior this year, and I have a 1.5-year-old with my husband, and I look at all the mistakes.
There's so many people that leave out the hard stuff in their testimonies, and this is it. Like,
You know what though? So let's come back to that in a second. There's, I like that idea. But I look at all the mistakes that I made with Aiden, and like, I'm so grateful to God that I get to do it over again. And in a way, it's almost an opportunity to make amends, because I loved my son so much, and I was sick. Addiction is a disease. It really is a disease. And I loved him as best as a sick person could. And, but I can't leave those parts of my story out, because God didn't leave those parts of the story out. Look at David. David was already the king. He was the king. He had been anointed. He was in the highest position in the land, second only to the Lord himself. And look what he did. And they didn't brush it under the rug. Like, right. We see that. We get to see that. And I think that's important when it comes to sharing my testimony, because, C.S. Lewis said, you can't compare one Christian to a non-Christian. You have to compare the Christian of who they are today to who they used to be. Amen. And that, if I can't paint that picture of what a piece of work I used to be, you would never be able to see the amazing work that God's done in my life and where I'm at today. Even the fact that I was able to almost get here early, like, I was a perpetually late human being for so long.
She's in your mailbox, Nikki. Yeah, I'm just kidding. It is season.
Yes. Yeah, just kidding.
So my cousin Mikey and I partied a lot. So after Aiden was born, we had moved out to O'Fallon. My mom and I left Granite City and came to O'Fallon. And this is where this is where my mom's sister, my cousin Mikey's mom, this is where they all lived. And so Mikey's friends that he grew up and went to high school with, they became my friends. So this group and I, we would party, get wasted all the time together. And there was actually an entire semester where I faked going to school at SCA so that I could have one night a week to go party with my friends. So my mom thought I was going to school, and I was not. Mom, I don't know if I ever told you that. I love you, and I'm sorry.
She's like,
but gosh, I was a very high functioning alcoholic. I had no problem maintaining a job. I actually had some pretty decent jobs. I was in school for large portions of this, and I was doing okay until about 2010. In 2010, fentanyl was starting to get big. And today, when you hear fentanyl, it's the synthetic, well, I guess it's a synthetic opioid, but what you're hearing about mostly is the stuff that's made in China and in Mexico by drug dealers. It's not the same fentanyl that somebody's getting in the hospital. There's a word for it. I wish I could remember, but what you're getting is this unregulated fentanyl. But back in 2010, when fentanyl was starting to become a big problem, a lot of what people were getting at the time was coming from the hospitals, coming from the medical system. And my cousin and several of our friends had gotten very much into opioids. My cousin struggled with heroin really bad. And it was for a few years he was struggling with heroin. But for the grace of God, there go I. I could have been with him, but had I not had Aiden, I would have been right down that path. But because I had Aiden, I dodged that bullet, if you will. I was able to avoid that mess. And my cousin, he wanted to quit so many times. He really did. He had gotten an apprenticeship as a union painter and was supposed to start this apprenticeship. And he had won these tickets to the Arapahoe Down with the Point. Do you guys know what that is? Have you heard of that? It was a big float trip. I don't remember what the Huzzah. I think it's on the Huzzah.
Yeah.
And with the Point, right? So it's, that crowd. So he goes to this float trip, and this was supposed to be like his last hurrah before he starts this apprenticeship. And a friend of ours had gotten fentanyl patches, and they were wearing them. And Mikey's, I guess, got wet on the float. And so he took it off and he ate it and was struggling breathing. And so our friends told him to go, like, just lay down in the tent, sleep it off. And Mikey was a tank. Okay. He was always the last one up. He could outdrink everybody. It didn't matter what we were doing, what substance we were putting in our bodies. Mikey was going to take the most of it. And he was never fazed by it. Like it was, everyone called him Cheech because we're Cuban and he looked way more Cuban than I do. So he just had this reputation, right? And everyone just thought he was indestructible. And he went and lay down in the tent and did not wake up. I got a call from one of our friends that was on the trip, said, hey, the ambulance is here. They're taking Mikey to the hospital. He's not breathing. You guys should come down here. And I had already been drinking at this time. I'm like, man, I'm already kind of buzzed. Do I want to drive? They were an hour and a half away. But like hospital, right? That's a big word. Yeah. And I'm 22 at the time, 23. And so I call his mom and call, our family and tell them what's going on. They're trying to call the hospital. The hospital's not telling us anything. They're just saying, you guys need to come down here. That should have been my first clue that something was not right. But I called my dad and I was like, what do I do? I'm like, I'm already tipsy. He's like, if it was my cousin, I would go. Okay. So I got in the car, picked up one of my friends.
So we're not thinking like it was serious, like you were just in this mindset of he's just like got hurt, like he'll be back, like.
That's exactly it. It was Mikey. Like he's indestructible. He'll be fine. He has crazy tolerance to everything. My mindset was that we were going to get down there. And my friend and I, that we drove together on the way down there, we even said, dude, he's going to be so mad when he wakes up and there's all the family in the room. Like, haha, man, party's over for you. But, that was not what happened. We get down there and I was drinking the whole way down. We had stopped at a gas station on the way down there to, for some road brews. And I remember drinking the whole way down And we get down there and I see my whole family is standing in the parking lot at this hospital. And I made eye contact with my stepdad. And he just shook his head. And that was the moment that I knew that Mikey was gone. We were so, I know I've said it several times already, we were so close, but I was thinking like, I mean, there's stories of us in diapers walking hand in hand through this parking lot at an apartment complex one of either my parents or his parents lived in. And because we had like let ourselves out of the sliding glass door and like we took off and
He was
like
your brother.
He was like my brother. We did everything together and oh my gosh, it rocked me. Like that is probably the single hardest thing I've had to deal with in my life was losing him. And I remember just holding my cousin, his sister, and like all I could say was my Mikey. That was the only thing I could get out. I was so crushed. But he was sick. I mean, again, the disease of addiction is a disease. You know, society today there's such a stigma attached to it. Like nobody looks at somebody with diabetes or with cancer that way, right? Like it is a disease and it cost him his life. And I was not the same after that. The high functioning portion of me went out the window. I don't think I stopped drinking for days. And you know, it's funny. Oh gosh. So the night Mikey died, I drove back home. I was at my boyfriend at the time's house. And I got back and I didn't even want to drink. Like I remember I went and took a shower and it's like 1-2 o'clock in the morning. I went and took a shower and like straightened my hair and did my makeup and got fully dressed. And, it's such a weird thing to do, but I think like in my mind,
weird coping.
That was, I think for some reason I thought if I look okay on the outside, that I'll feel okay on the inside. But after that, I drank the night and I remember the next day waking up hungover and then it was just days of that, just not being able, I couldn't stay sober. Like the minute it would wear off, it was like the reality would set in and how am I going to do life without this person, you know? And it took a long time for me to start feeling even any semblance of normal. I don't know how I got this honorable position in my family of being the eulogy person, but I gave the eulogy at Mikey's funeral. And then again at his dad's funeral when his dad passed away a few years ago. And then at my grandmother's this past year. And again, losing people is just... It makes me appreciate the Lord so much more because it really does give you this hope that I'm going to see them again. Right. With Mikey, I don't know if he was a believer. I know he grew up much like I did, going to Sunday school, but I don't know if he believed in God. I don't know if he accepted Jesus, and I don't know. I don't know where he's going to be. I don't. But in that grieving, that time of grieving his loss, I don't know how I managed to keep my job. My job was really supportive at the time, but I dropped out of college. I couldn't keep doing it. And the guy that I was with at the time, I mean, all we did was just party. That was our relationship. It was just drinking, and not hard partying, but it was more of, now we're just going to stay at home on the weekends and we're going to drink. Mm-hmm. Like that's it. It wasn't as much about going out anymore as it was, okay, now I really am just masking this pain. And until about 2013, when I got pregnant again.
So 3 years later.
Yep. So 3 years later, I got pregnant again, and my boyfriend at the time, same guy, we had actually just broken up, and then found out I was pregnant, and so we got back together and moved in together. Same thing. My family's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so amazing when you're pregnant. You're the best pregnant person in the world." I'm like, "Yeah, I haven't drank anything in months." So I had my son Nolan, who's now 11.
I have a Nolan.
You have a Nolan?
Mm-hmm.
Aw.
My middle son.
Aw, he's my middle son. Man, he's a character too. But shortly after Nolan was born, I had postpartum depression really bad. And his dad is a great guy. Not a bad person. But we were like oil and water.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we fought all the time. And at this time in my life, I was starting to feel, and I think the sobriety had something to do with it, but I was starting to feel the Lord tug on me again. And so I decided to become Catholic. And growing up, I had my best friend growing up, her name was Shauna. Her family was Catholic. So I spent a lot of time in the Catholic Church. If you would have asked me at that time, what religion I was, I would have told you I was Catholic, but I had never gone through like confirmation and all that stuff. So I decided okay, Lord, I feel you pulling on me. This is where I know of you to be. So I'm going to go. And I went through the RCIA, the Rite of Catholic Initiation for Adults. And I became Catholic. And that was one of the things that started to create this rift between my son's father and I, was because I had asked him, you have a sponsor. When you go through RCIA, you have somebody who's already Catholic become a sponsor for you. But you have to meet on Sundays, I think it was. I don't know. What night is football? Is it Monday nights or is it Sundays? Okay, so whatever day football was, right? I asked him if he'd be my sponsor, and he said, "Well, no, because it's football season." And I'm like, and he wanted to drink with his buddies. I'm like, "Dang, dude. Okay, cool. We're obviously not on the same path. That's all right. You do you." Again, he's not a bad guy.
Yeah.
We're 23.
Yeah,
So, no, actually I would have been 26 or 27 at this point. Anyway. So I remember at one point praying, I said, "God, if this is who I'm supposed to be with, then I need you to help me make this work. And if it's not, then I want you to send me the man who I'm supposed to marry." And not long after that, I met my now husband, Dan. We were coworkers, and he just has this larger than life personality. He's hilarious. And he would always tease me at work and play fun pranks on me. I think one time he had one of those air horn things and he put it on the bottom of my chair. So I sat down in my chair and it was like, wah. That's just the kind of guy Dan is. I'm sure his mother would tell so many more embarrassing stories like that, but he's a prankster. I have a really good one I'll tell you guys, but it's not safe for the podcast. So remind me afterwards. If you ever see me in person and you want to know what the story is, I'll tell you, but I'm not going to put it out there. He'll be embarrassed. Anyway, so we started to connect, and I, at this time, right, I love the Lord, but I don't think I was saved at this point yet. Definitely wasn't living my life for the Lord, but I had this hunger, and Dan was attracted to that. And he didn't really realize that I was still in a relationship. And I knew, I had already checked out of this relationship, but hadn't actually ended things. And I remember there was this night I hung out, Dan and I, it was one of the first times we actually hung out outside of work, and it was a whole team thing. It wasn't just the two of us, but I remember thinking that night, okay, I really want to get to know Dan and get closer with him. And I got so wasted that night, you guys. I had on heels and I fell so many times. And I remember thinking later, why on earth would this guy have ever gone out with me after watching me drunkenly fall that many times? But he was a good guy and he didn't judge me for my insanity. But we started to connect, And I broke things off with Nolan's dad, moved back in with my mom. And a few months later, Dan and I moved in together. And after I had Nolan, you know, I nursed for a couple months. So I wasn't really drinking, but he had issues latching. And so like I pumped and then I stopped. It was just too much trying to work and pump. So once I was free from breastfeeding, the drinking would just, I almost like picked up where I left off. And at this time in my life, I was also a habitual marijuana smoker. Like I smoked all day, every day. I would wake up in the morning. I would get high. It would wear off. I would get high again. It would wear off. I would get high like all day until the time I went to bed. And you never would have known just being around me that I was smoking pot all day. I wasn't like acting, you know, ridiculous. But to me, it was almost like self-medicating. The way, you know, like an antidepressant. It took the edge of life off, which I still needed at this time because I had all of this emotional baggage that I hadn't dealt with. And, you know, it's funny, if you ever have like a physical pain that you don't realize you're dealing with until it's gone. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's how the emotional pain was for me at that time. It was just so constant. And I just had to keep self-medicating. So I wasn't drinking every day, but there was still that thing. It was not about how often you drink. It's about what happens when you drink. And, you know, it didn't take long before that started to follow me into this new relationship. So Dan and I were together for about a year. And towards the end of that time, I mean, I wanted to quit smoking so bad. I wanted to quit drinking so bad. I did so many, and I had all these crazy ideas, right, of how I was going to make this happen. We tried so many things. I even said, okay, let's do this. I'm going to buy a whole month's worth of weed, and then we're going to portion it out and start with this amount and then taper it down until the end of the month, and I won't be smoking anymore.
Did you feel like you had a problem and you were at that point recognizing you're using it as a coping mechanism or an addiction?
I knew it was an addiction for sure. Okay. I don't know if I knew at this point necessarily that it was a coping mechanism.
And was Dan doing it too?
No, Dan didn't smoke. He would drink with me like on the weekends and stuff, but he was more of a responsible drinker. I was the one who would be taking shots. We would take a shot and then he'd go off to the bathroom and I'd be like, take like 5 more shots while he's in there and put it back in the freezer like nothing happened. He always knew, I'm sure. There's no way he didn't because we would be like 2 shots in and I'm already plastered. Like, I'm just a lightweight, guys. I'm joking. No, he knew I had a problem. But we had such a spiritual and emotional connection and it wasn't bad all the time. It was just when it got bad, it was really bad. And so it started to take a toll on our relationship. It was impacting him. And we had talked about it. And so I wanted to quit. I didn't want to live my life this way anymore. I did not want, and I think one of the big clues for me was how I felt when I didn't have weed. Like if I ran out and I couldn't get any, it was the worst feeling in the world. People say that marijuana is not addictive and I say it absolutely is. I withdrew from marijuana when I was able to finally quit. Like
Can you describe what that felt like? Was it physical pain?
Yeah.
Was it mental? Or what did it do?
Both. It was cold sweats. I felt nauseous. I had headaches. And just this, I don't know how to describe it. It's like being so thirsty, but no matter how much water you drink, you still feel so parched. Like if you've ever like ran for a really long time and you're like sure. So thirsty, you can feel it in your bones. It's almost like that. But just, and it's this phenomenon of craving, like just craving it so intensely and then not being able to satisfy it. It's just, or like if you have a really bad itch that you can't scratch, I feel like it's kind of like that. But I tried all these ways of quitting and none of them worked. When I tried to portion everything out, it was gone within a whole month of what I normally would have done was gone in like a week.
So you actually probably did more.
Oh yeah.
Like
it was
Dan.
bad. Yeah. Dan laughs about that now. He's my crazy ideas. But you know, eventually like we had to split ways. And the last night the last night that I ever drank, Dan and I had this big fight. He had been talking to, confiding in a friend that was a woman, and he has since apologized. Like, that was inappropriate. I shouldn't have been doing that. Sure. It was on Snapchat, which already makes it look seedy, you know. I believe him when he says that nothing happened when we were together, but at the time there was no convincing me otherwise. And so I got obliterated, like so intoxicated. And it's so funny.
Did you do it to hurt him or to hide the feelings?
To push the feelings down, because I was like crushed. Like, I loved Dan so much. And we had even talked about like that we thought we were supposed to be together, that God brought us together. We felt like we were supposed to be married. And it was just, I'm like, okay, why is this happening? Like, I blindsided by it. And to be fair to Dan, there was this moment when he was in the hospital with like some stomach issues, and he had been admitted. There's that word again, hospital. I feel like I should have, like, oh, that's a serious word. But I was too focused on like, well, if I'm with him all night in the hospital, I'm not gonna be able to smoke or anything. So I'm just gonna go spend some time, and then I'm gonna peace out.
So
and that's
really,
what I
that was
did.
your priority.
Yeah, it was. And I feel awful about it now. Me today would never do that.
Yeah.
But then the disease was so strong. Like, I couldn't right size my life. I could not put things into proper priority order and be there for the people that mattered to me. But that moment of me not being there for him was really when things started to go down for him, and why he was even confiding in this friend, because he was hurting.
Oh, that's crushing. For
Yeah.
sure.
It is.
Yeah.
So this night, again, I was so intoxicated, and I was blacked out for most of this. I don't remember the majority of it, but I was hurting so much by this perceived betrayal. And I guess in my mind, I just wanted the world around me to look the way that I felt on the inside. And so I completely trashed our apartment, tore books up, took the back of the toilet seat and like smashed the mirror with it. I don't know why.
gosh.
Throwing dresser drawers down the stairs. Like, I don't know. I don't remember doing this, but I demolished the apartment. It looked like a hurricane had gone through there. And I guess I passed out, and I remember waking up in the next morning, and my stepmom is sitting on my bed, and she's like, Megan, she's like, you need to go to the hospital. Like, we need to take you to rehab. And I'm just, I don't even know what's happening. I'm shocked.
Were your boys there?
No,
Or in the
the
midst
kids
of-
were not there. And by the grace of God, the majority of we didn't drink when we had the kids. You know, it would be, we had every other weekend. So every other weekend, his girls would be with their mom, and my boys would be with their dads. And so those were our party weekends.
Gotcha.
And that was, I will say this. I've always tried to put my kids first and tried to keep my stuff together for them. And at this stage in my life, I was much better at that, at being a mom and being there for my kids, than I had been when I was 19, leaving Aiden in the crib. That would not have happened at this stage in my life. But I took advantage of those opportunities when they weren't around. That was when I would
Gotcha.
really lean into giving into my flesh and my addiction. So I wake up, my stepmom's there. Apparently the cops had been there at some point. The neighbors had called the cops because they heard everything that was going on. And I guess in the blackout, or in the midst of all this happening, right? Like, so Dan calls my parents, calls my dad, tells them what's going on. So they come over, and I didn't see this, but, my dad, like, I guess opened the door to our apartment and saw like the devastation that I had caused, and just dropped to his knees and began weeping. And my dad and I have always been really close. I was always a daddy's girl. And I can't imagine what that would be like for a parent to walk in and see that, to see, wow, my kid is not in a good place right now. And gosh, I don't know. But so they took me to St. Joe's West, and I did a detox stint there, maybe 7 days. It was not long, but it was what I needed at that time. And when it's funny, I remember sitting on my bed, before we even left my apartment. And this was another one of those audible moments of God. And he said, you need to go to AA. Now, mind you, I had seen my dad try AA and it not work for him. My uncle, I even tried it when I was 16 and had first moved to Granite City with my mom. And my thoughts up to this point was, I know I need help, but I'm not going that route. 12 steps, not for me. And at this moment, it was like a surrender. Like, I was like, okay, God, like I'm going to trust you. So it was really funny. I get to inpatient rehab and to detox, which is what I needed. I needed to have at least a few days where I could not access anything. Mm-hmm. Really, those first few days are the hardest. Mm-hmm. And I'm fortunate enough today to work in long-term recovery. I work at Sauna Lake Recovery. It's an addiction treatment center in Dittmer, Missouri. I'm the marketing director there. And I wish I would have had a program like theirs to go to then. But you know, the first step was detox. And so I was able to at least do that at St. Joe's. While I'm in there, I'm like, okay, I need to go to AA. And in AA, there's this book. It's called The Big Book. It's like the textbook, if you will, for the program. And there weren't any left up at St. Joe's. So I called the 212 Club in O'Fallon, which is a place where they have 12-step meetings. And I said, and this is my entitled little 26-year-old self, I am sorry, but there's no more big books up here. Could you guys bring me one? So they did. So they brought a big book up there. And it wasn't until afterwards that I find out, like, they cost money. They're not just like free literature people leaving around. They do donate them to hospitals and things like that. But I still to this day don't know who brought that big book up there, but I still have it. And whoever you are, I hope that I see you in heaven and can tell you thank you, because some selfless person took that call, brought the book from O'Fallon to Wentzville to the hospital to give to me. So, and I started reading it there. And as soon as I got out, I started hitting meetings. And when you first get in 12-step, the recommendation is like 90 meetings in 90 days. And it was really hard because, mind you, I've got two small kids.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Is about 5 at this point. Nolan is 1. He had just turned 1 in January. And this was March. My sobriety date is March 8th of 2014. And I almost forgot to include this. I'll tell you guys this. So when I was in high school, one of my very good friends, her name is Jackie. She was like the friend that I would talk to about guys. Like, she was the one who, if I needed dating advice or wanted, you know, hey, we're going to go drinking and we're going to go pick up dudes at the bar. Like, she was my side chick for all of that. But we were very close. And whenever we were 21, Jackie had lost her life to drinking and driving. And she had a daughter who was the same age as Aiden. So Jackie and I were pregnant together. She was actually pregnant at my baby shower, and I went to hers. It was so cute.
It's been really special.
It was.
Like, yeah.
It was. But she, like I said, lost her life drinking and driving on her 21st birthday. And I had a sticker on the back of my car that said like 3888 to 3807. So, you know, exactly 21 years. And it wasn't until I was a few days sober and I was trying to figure out, okay, well, what's my sobriety date? You know, you get a date. And it was March 8th, which was her birthday.
Wow.
And yes.
Yeah.
And so it gets crazier. So that last night I was drinking, I'm drinking and driving. Okay. And I'm talking like, Jackie, I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to pray for me. Like, I'm dealing with these guy problems with Dan. You know, I'm talking to her like she's still here, which it was crazy. And then then to find out that the next day would have been her birthday, and that was the day that I got sober.
Wow.
And I think God, like, He knew. I don't know. I don't believe today that Jackie can hear me. Okay. I don't know that that's how it works or not. All right. I don't want to talk theology on that point, but God can. Yeah. Exactly. Right. God knew where I was. He knew what I needed. And, you know, when it comes to dealing with family members or loved ones who are struggling with addiction, they've got to hit a bottom. They've got to hit a bottom. And that bottom is different for everybody. Some people have shallow bottoms. Some people it's 10 miles deep. Yeah. But God knows. God knew what I needed. And knowing that my sobriety date was her birthday and the anniversary of her death was something that I held on to. And
it's like a confirmation.
Like you couldn't mess it up either. Like you probably was harder because you would not have that date again.
Yes, exactly. Because I knew, okay, if I drink again, I'm going to lose this day. And it meant so much to me. So,
and it, in a way, is honoring to her too.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. And there's been a few different sobriety birthdays that I've had where I've messaged her mom on Facebook and been like, hey, Gwen, I just want you to know that, your daughter still played a part in my life. And because she knew me when I was that crazy teenager getting wasted with her daughter. She knew me back then. So I hope that touched her to hear that, that I got sober. And so, within the first few months, the 90 meetings in 90 days was a challenge. Again,
did you almost give in? I mean, were there a few of moments?
There was definitely some moments. I mean, it was tempting. But I think one of the hardest things was still having to be a mom and be present when I knew I needed this time for self-care. Yeah. But I had burnt the bridges of my family so bad. Like they didn't, and I don't blame them. Like it was hard to ask for my mom, like, hey, I need you to watch the kids so that I can go to a meeting. She didn't want to do it. So a lot of times it was with the kids in tow, with especially Aiden, going to meetings. And
what was it about this meeting, or was it somebody there? Was there anything additional other than just the normal AA program that helped solidify it for you?
I think that in the beginning, I was able to connect with some other people that were right in the same place in the journey with me. There was a handful of girls that had very similar lengths of sobriety time, and we connecting with the right people. So they say, early on in the program to find someone who has what you want. And that's what I did, is I looked for someone who had their ducks in a row and was happy. And, I honestly, in the beginning, did not believe that I could still have fun and enjoy life and be carefree.
It's such a lie, isn't it? That's so sad.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's such a lie. In fact, that's one of the things that, if I could talk to somebody who is actively in addiction right now and tell them, it's not the end of the party. In fact, the party gets better. It really does. Being sober. It was funny when I was, I'd say 2, 3, maybe a month in. Okay. I started to feel like I had been high. I mean, it was years at this point, just all day. Mm-hmm. So being sober felt like being in an altered state of mind. And it took getting used to it. Once the craving started to kind of subside, it was like this whole new view of the world. But with that came all those emotions that I had been putting a Band-Aid on and stuffing down and taking the edge off of. Now I had to learn how to actually deal with those things. I no longer had this, this blanket, if you will, or a way of just skirting by those things. I had to actually learn to deal with my emotions. And I think that was one of the biggest hurdles, that first bit of my sobriety. But I had really awesome women to show me the way. And
are you still friends with some of those women?
I am still friends with some of those women. One of my early sponsors, her name was Lynette, and she's such a funny person. Lynette is just a larger than life personality. And what I loved the most about her was that she would tell it the way it is. And I needed that sometimes. Yeah. I needed somebody to say, Megan, you have 90 days sober. You're not getting a puppy. That's not a good idea. But I had to learn how to be an adult. I had to learn how to pay bills on time, how to maintain my home and have car insurance, how to get license plates on my car. That was foreign to me at this point in my life. It was.
So did you not have car insurance the whole time?
Oh, Hardly ever.
Oh,
I mean, what was the point, right? Like
Living on the edge.
Bill, you
Yeah.
were drinking it.
Really, really on the
Oh, I
edge.
know. It was
Do you
why.
ever look back? I mean, you have to look back and be like, how did I survive?
Absolutely. It was by the grace of God. There's so many of those close call moments or times when I'm like, I don't know how I got out of that one. It was just by the grace of God. But yeah, like, why would I spend my drinking money on insurance? Like, nobody's checking on me to see if I have insurance unless I get pulled over. And if I do, I'll just talk my way out of it. That was my mindset. But now today, obviously I know better. But I had to learn how to function as an adult and as a mom. And towards the end of my drinking, like Nolan, he's one, right? He honestly didn't even want to be around me. Like, I think he could just sense that something was off. And like when I would go to pick him up from daycare, like he would just cry. And it broke my heart. And that changed. Like I started to, our whole relationship changed. Like he wanted mommy. And I think he could sense that things were different. And Aiden, he was such a sweet boy. You know, he got to see me at some of my worst points. He really did. But, you know, praise God that Nolan and now my 3 youngest, who are 7, 6, and 1, never have to see that. Like they don't have to know what that mom is like. Yeah. So that first year, I was going to Catholic church at the time, but I started going to this non-denominational church, and I was actually doing both for a while. I would get up super early at 8 a.m., would go to 8 o'clock mass, and then would go to the non-denominational church at 10.
I can get.
Yes. Because that was exactly it. And whenever Dan and I broke up, like the whole apartment situation, like that was pretty much the end of the relationship. I remember my aunt telling me, she's like, one of the best things you can do for your kids right now is to show them how you face this challenge. And if your response to this is to go to the Lord, then you're leading them down a whole new path. And so I did. So I was going to this non-denominational church, and eventually quit going to mass and was just going to this non-denom church. And there was a Celebrate Recovery program that I was involved with that was just kicking off at this church. And when I had a little over, I think I just passed a year, they say you're not supposed to date in the first year of sobriety. And I really did take that to heart. Like I tried to stay out of a relationship. But in the back of my mind, like there was still this, like, I wonder what Dan's doing. I wonder how Dan's doing. There was still hurt and anger and all these emotions.
Had you had no contact with him in this time?
There was a couple times when we had talked, but
No longer working together.
No, I actually lost my job that we had together while we were still together. So before I got sober, but there was at one point my phone rings and it's Dan, and I answered it. It was like a super awkward call. We talked for like a second. And he swears it was a butt dial. I still don't believe him. He swears it was a butt dial. We get off the phone. He texts me. He's like, "That was awkward. Do you want to try it again?" And his version of this is that when we were off the phone, he prayed, "Okay, God," like, 'cause I sounded healthy. Like we talked for a second. I told him like, "I'm doing so good right now." I'm like, sent him a picture of me at my friend's wedding.
Man, why are you calling?
Exactly. Like I sent him a picture of myself from my friend's wedding. And so I like looked beautiful and all the wedding makeup and like, see what you're missing. Like how great I am now. Anyway, but so he sees this picture and he's like, "You just looked healthy. Like you looked healthy." And so he said that he prayed like, "God, if this is supposed to work, Lord, just please, like just bring us back together." And so he texted me, "That was awkward. Do you want to try again?" Mm-hmm. And so we did. We talked. We got back on the phone. We talked for like hours.
Like right away. Like right after the text.
So.
And do you still have that picture? I feel
still
like we
have
need
that
it for the
picture.
trailer.
I will show it to you guys.
Okay.
So we talked for hours, and then that slowly progressed into, okay, well, do you want to see each other? Do you want to come over? Like, let's spend some time together. And I mean, it was what it had always should have been. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I knew that we were supposed to be together, but for whatever reason, like this was the path the Lord took us down. And, you know, my recovery was very much that way, where it was a hard path. It wasn't just this, there's people who pray and then God just removes the craving, removes the addiction from them. And I believe that can happen. But for me, that wasn't what the Lord knew I wanted or knew I needed. And so we were back together for probably 6-7 months, and then he proposed, and we got married in September of 2016. I think we'll celebrate 8 years this month.
This is so happy.
It is. But God just, he brought everything back. Like he redeemed and restored that relationship. And
never too far gone.
No, it's not. And oh my gosh,
even for your children. And I mean, this is what beauty is.
It is.
Only God can do this.
Only God. I can't believe I almost forgot to leave this part out, but when I was still like at the very end there of my active use, I remember sitting in my car, like it was the end of the end. Like I knew things were slipping through my hands. My relationship was on the rocks. I had lost my job at this point, was about to lose my home. Dan had actually already moved out at this point, and I'm sitting in my car. It's raining. I've got Joy FM on. And that song comes on.
Gosh dang it, Joy FM.
I know.
I'm doing that.
Right song at the right time.
It is the right song at the right time. Literally.
It truly is.
It was
What a ministry it is.
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. I've been so blessed by that
Have you
in
ever
so
been
many
on Joy
ways.
FM?
I did. I got to do my 99-second story.
Do you have a clip of that?
I do. I can send it to you guys.
Samantha, and we can share it in the community.
Yes, I can do that.
Gosh.
And this is actually in my 99-second story, but I was, the song Keep Making Me, Make Me Broken, so I can be healed. Okay.
That's not registering.
Oh,
is it old?
It's Sidewalk Prophets.
I love
And
them.
it's make me empty so I can be
he's my,
filled.
like, favorite song for Sadie's situation, but yeah, I'll have to look that one up.
Yes. So
Should pull it up.
I'm sitting in my car, it's raining, and this song, and it's making me broken. And like, so, and I'm, till you are my one desire, till you are my one true love. And whew, I'm getting chills just thinking about this.
Yeah.
That song became my prayer in that moment. And I was bawling my eyes out and singing the song to the Lord. And that's exactly
and
what
heard
happened.
The song before?
I don't
Or no?
I think so, probably.
Okay. 'Cause I mean, but
in that
was
moment,
God speaking right to you.
Yep.
Hold on, what song? Okay. Do I?
Well, it has a weird beginning. The music video.
Oh, I don't recognize it.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
what the heck is happening
You
right
just
now?
fast forward.
Is that-
is that an ad or is that? It's probably actually the thing. Just go like halfway through.
What?
So I can be healed, 'cause I'm so callous.
I love this.
Now I can't feel. I wanna run to you with heart wide open. Make me broken.
Okay, I know that part. I recognize.
Yes.
So good.
Wow. Okay.
And that was really so perfect, because I said at the beginning, I have a prodigal son story, and that's exactly what it was. The Lord knew what it took to break me. I asked him and he did it, and it was not comfortable. It was not easy, but I would not have had it any other way. Had I not lost the things that I lost, had he not removed the things from me that I could not remove myself, I never would have been able to turn to him, because I still would have been so focused on myself, on what I wanted. Addiction is a selfish disease. It really is. Like, and I don't mean that it's selfish to have it. I mean that when you're struggling with addiction, it's hard to see past your own nose. Like you're almost trapped in your own perspective, your own needs and desires, because you can't, like, it overcomes everything that you do. And it's not by it's not by choice. And that's what's so hard too, I think, for people who have family members that live with some type of substance or alcohol use disorder, to not take that personally. It's hard not to when your loved one is choosing drugs and alcohol over you. But we have to remember that these are sick people, and who's the ultimate physician,
Right.
but the Lord.
Yeah.
And so he healed me. The character defects that I went into my sobriety with, he revealed to me and began working on those things. And the hurt and the baggage that I had from my past that I never dealt with, was able to face those things, these giants, and actually process. I finally was able to process and truly mourn losing Mikey. And was able to forgive myself for the things that I had done. That was one of the hardest things I had to do, was to look in the mirror and say, man, that was me, but God. And it took a while before I really grasped in sobriety that I didn't have to be that hopeless, helpless sinner anymore. In the beginning, it was, oh my God, thank you, Lord, that I am saved, that you're healing me, that I'm a new person, right? And it was this awareness in the beginning.
Felt different, right?
It did.
Choosing God, what did that make you feel? Even though you're going through withdrawals, what did that do for you?
Oh my gosh. In the very, very beginning, it was a moment by moment thing. I mean, I couldn't, it literally, they say one day at a time, but it was moment at a time for me. And there was multiple times when I'd find myself in situations where I just wanted to drink. I wanted to get high. I wanted to do anything. And I had to rely on the Lord to get past that
So you felt
time.
his presence.
I did. I really did. And I actually joked that it felt like I had a soup can phone to God when I got sober, because I would pray and he would answer my prayers like in the craziest ways. He was showing up big time in my life, and it was amazing. It really was.
Were there lies that you believed during the addiction about yourself that now hindsight, looking back, I mean, that you've healed from?
Yes.
And have you changed? Like, have you discovered who you are?
That is the perfect question, because, and I said it a few times previously, but that the drinking and the partying had become my identity. Mm-hmm. And I believed that my worth came from my physical appearance. I believed that it came from other people's acceptance of me, that what other people thought of me is what determined my value in this world. And by leaning into the Lord and reading his word and seeing what he says about me, those lies were, and I've still worked through these. Sometimes it creeps up, but I know now that I am the righteousness of God through Christ Jesus. I know that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. He knows how many hairs are on my head. The God of the universe knows my name. Like, he knows me. He knows who Megan is, and he knows what my desires are, and he cares about what's important to me, and he wants me to be with him. Like, that blows my mind. And when I first got sober, this idea that, okay, I am the worthless, helpless sinner, and I need Jesus so bad. Like, I was living in that mindset for a long time. And and that was okay. I think I needed to be there for a time. Mm-hmm. But I had this revelation, maybe, I don't even know how, like maybe 9 months to a year in, that no, I'm not the helpless, worthless sinner. I was the helpless, worthless sinner. And now I have Jesus. I am a new creature in Christ. Yeah. And it was this revolutionary idea, I think, that I don't need to live my life that way. All that time, all the love and affection and everything else I was trying to find through people, through relationships, through drugs and alcohol, this hole I was trying to fill was my heart, my soul's desire for the Lord. Yeah. That's the thing that was missing. Mm-hmm. And once I started to truly experience the Lord in my life, that desire was gone. The desire was gone. Just like the desire to drink was gone. This need to fill was being filled in him. And that's a thing I have to continually remember, because I'll get into seasons where, okay, my identity is in my work, or my identity is in the service that I'm doing at church, or my identities in my marriage, and all my love is coming from my husband. Yes, as a mom. But I have to, inevitably, the Lord brings me back to this place of like, no, if you were like Job and all of that stuff was gone, would you still be praising me? And I want to without a doubt be able to say yes, that I would, that God is the center of my life, that it's not me and my desires, even my husband. Yeah, that it's the Lord. And it took walking this journey to be able to get to that point where, I mean, man, when you're at the bottom, the only place you have to go is up. So that was me with my arms raised high, Lord, help me. And he did. He saved me. And today, like I said, I work in addiction treatment. I'm the marketing director at Sonic Recovery. So every day I get to help in some way to be part of other people finding recovery. And my husband and I are very fortunate to be able to serve at our church. We go to Christ-Centered Church in Troy. And, we're both on the worship team. My husband is the youth pastor. So I'm you know how that goes when your husband's the lead of something. Like you're there too. So
wow.
Yes.
You're a walking, living, breathing testimony. I cannot imagine. I mean, you meet in, where you're working and influencing people, where, you're attending church and supporting the church, how you're influencing people. But I can only imagine the influence that you've had on people that have personally known you since your youth and seen you. I can imagine how proud your parents both still living, how proud they are of you.
Yeah.
And I always think it's great to have testimonies and get through hard things. It's great to say that you're a Christian and you love the Lord and all these things, but even greater is the testimony from somebody that has walked through fire, through hell, hard things, and has been completely reborn and changed. What a testimony that is.
So
I praise God that I am not the man I used to be. What's that expression? Not the man, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's that expression that...
Is there something else? Is this a different podcast? No, I'm just kidding. Whoa.
But there's a saying like, I'm not the man I used to be. I'm not the man I want to be. Or no, I'm not the man I want to be. I'm not the man I ought to be. But by the grace of God, I'm not the man I used to be. And I feel like that's very much me. I'm not where I want to be. And I'm not where I should be yet. I'm working towards that. But praise God that I am not where I used to be.
I have a question. So do you still have temptations, or?
That is a great question. The first year or two of my recovery, if my car was going to break down, it was going to be in front of the bar. Like the enemy knew.
Oh, dang.
He knew the weak spots in my fortress, right? He knew the cracks in my wall and how to get me. But now I don't have the desire to drink or any of that. And every once in a while I have like a weird dream or something. Like that's probably the closest to that I ever get. But
where you're drinking, or?
Yeah, those are the worst dreams too.
Oh gosh. And you're like, I wake up. Oh, it's just a dream.
But it's a struggle for people in long-term recovery that to not replace the addiction with other things. For a lot of people, it's the gym. For some people, it's church, For some people, it's recovery. And for me, it was that for a while. It was recovery was everything that I did. But I needed that in that moment.
Yeah.
But I had to grow on to that next phase of my life. And now I'm just so much more aware of things. Like caffeine. I know I have an addiction to caffeine. I love my coffee. Energy drinks. Probably shouldn't be drinking them. But I have this... I can tell now, like when something's going to be a problem for me. And it's funny. One of the things that showed me very early on that it really was this like allergy of the mind, like a physical thing was happening when I was maybe like 3 months sober, and maybe 6 months actually. I was a little ways in, and I had a cold, and I was taking Dayquil, and I caught myself like looking forward to the next dose of Dayquil. I'm like, whoa, that's weird. So I call my sponsor. I'm like, what's up with why am I like looking forward to taking this cough medicine? Like, I'm not trying to do that. And she said, sometimes the cough medicine has alcohol in it. And I was like, you're kidding me. And I went and looked, and sure enough, there was alcohol in that Dayquil.
You could sense that.
And isn't that crazy?
Wow.
So
Unbelievable.
there's other things that create
Thank God
that.
for the Holy Spirit.
I
Holy Spirit's
know,
like,
right?
girl.
Yes.
Caution.
But there's things that will create that phenomenon of craving for me, like peanut butter. I know that sounds weird, but like I gotta keep peanut butter arm's length because I love it so much, and I will overdo it. And so when there's things that
I used to sleep when I was like growing up, like I would have my own thing of peanut butter under the bed, jars. I would just eat the whole.
it's addicting.
I love peanut butter, and like I don't eat it that much because I'm like, well, it's not the best calories, but not the point.
It's not. It's so unfortunate.
I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So does your husband, does he still drink or is he sober with you?
No, Dan, he has abstained from alcohol with me, and he didn't have a drinking problem, but he made that choice. And there's been a couple of like occasions, like at a Christmas party, you know, once where he might have like a drink with my stepdad or something, but he doesn't drink. And my dad actually got sober about a year after I did.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so he and I have.
Did you play any part in his sobriety?
No, my dad, I mean, it maybe a little bit, just because he saw me doing it. I don't know if that affected him at all, but he was one of those people that just prayed, and the Lord relieved him of his alcohol. And my dad had been drinking, I mean, since I was a child, since before then, like, you know, 20 something more, 30 something, I don't even know, long time. And God just healed him of that. But that was what, you know, that was his journey. But yeah, I remember him, he was still drinking when I first got sober. And only reason I really remember that is because I remember there was this moment when I'm sitting on my dad's back patio and he has a beer. And I have this thought like, oh my gosh, I am never going to be able to just have a beer with my dad again. And that had been such
like
a,
we do.
right.
It's like our thing.
Exactly. And it was like a bonding thing. And so,
Which sounds so stupid now,
it
right?
does. It
but
does.
I can see that.
But it was like, I was starting to have like an anxiety attack, like this anxiety response to the infinite future and how big that seemed, that I would never be able to have a drink of alcohol with my dad again, have a beer with dad. And God is so good. Okay, so there's a quart of motor oil sitting on the stoop, on the patio. And I look at the motor oil and I just feel like the Holy Spirit's saying, you are never going to be able to drink that motor oil. And I don't know why. I was like, okay, cool. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I am. I'm never going to be able to drink that motor oil, and I can't drink that beer. So what? What of it?
Nice.
And it, oh man, it grounded me in that moment. Like, thank you, Jesus, for pointing that out. It seems so silly, but
it's a lot. It's a lot. Constant battles, I'm sure, especially at first, like you're saying. Maybe to wrap this up, 2 questions. What would you tell somebody that struggles with addiction? If you could do like an elevator's pitch, a 1 minute, or, you know, if you could sum up, or
99 seconds.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
For somebody that struggles with addiction, and then also for somebody that has a loved one, like a parent that has a child or a spouse, somebody else struggling with addiction.
So for the person who is still struggling, my best word of encouragement would be to just give yourself a shot. Like, what have you got to lose? You know, if say you try to quit and it's not for you, you can go back and have more of the same. But there's so many resources. There's so much help out there that no matter how far gone you are or how little of a problem you think you have, whatever part of the spectrum you're on, if you have to ask yourself, do I have a problem? The answer is probably yes. And if it has any kind of a hold on your life, then it's likely time to start exploring what life would look like without it. Praise God that we have the resources available today, like programs like Sonic Lake Recovery, things like Alcoholics Anonymous, Celebrate Freedom, Celebrate Recovery. Like, there's so many options out there for people to get help. And the fear of change, that was one of the biggest fears that I had, was that my life is not going to be fun. It's going to be too hard. I found out on the other side of recovery that I couldn't have been more wrong. I have so much more fun now, and my life is so much more fulfilling now than I ever could have dreamed that it would be. And for the person who's, you know, got the family member who's struggling, the most powerful thing you can do for that person is pray, because it seems insurmountable. And, you know, it doesn't matter how many times you tell somebody, why can't you just do this for your kids? Why can't you do it for your mom? Why can't you do it for your husband or for your wife? That's, if we could, we would stop.
Sure.
You know? And it's not because we don't want to. It's not because we don't love our kids. It's not because we don't love our family. It is a disease, and we have to treat it as such. And so cover that person in prayer, and do not give up.
Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Go to
Bible
war.
says pray without ceasing. So pray without ceasing for that person. And it's not easy, and it's going to hurt. It
and
does.
Then means you trust in the Lord, right? But you don't pray and just ask, you pray in faith.
Yes.
So faith is the assurance of things hoped for, not things you have right now.
Exactly.
And you trust. That's so good.
Yep.
Really good. Wow. What an incredible testimony.
Truly.
I think I cried like 5 times.
I know. I feel like we could talk forever about this, but we want to hear your story in 99 seconds, story of him.
Yes, I will send that to you guys.
And I want to see that picture of you at the wedding.
I will send that as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you for being so raw and
Yes.
vulnerable.
Absolutely.
I can relate to your story somewhat too. I feel like we all can, right? And especially those that have found God. I mean, just that in and of itself. I was somebody totally different than I am now. Ask my former friends, ask my husband who knew me since my younger years, especially ask my mom. So it's so good. There's just such a peace and contentment when you find the Lord and you go all in. And it's way better than you could have ever imagined. You feel like you have to give everything up, but you actually gain everything.
Isn't that incredible?
Finally submit. It is.
What is that Bible verse about? When you lay your life down, you save it? Well, thank you for the opportunity to do this. And please feel free to share my contact information with this, because if there is anybody who is struggling and they want someone to talk to, I am very happy to field those phone calls or Facebook messages. You know, if someone just needs some encouragement or to be pointed towards resources, I am really happy to do that.
It's amazing. And maybe we can get some of those resources too, because we're making a packet for women.
Awesome.
For going through other stuff, so it'd be very helpful to have that in there. Yeah.
Any resources that you have, even just like a list view
Yeah,
or
I can do
whatever,
that.
would be great. But we had somebody recently post in the community group that they're struggling with sobriety, right?
Yep.
So I think did I tag you in that? I feel like
Maybe.
I did. Okay.
I was going to, and then I was like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
I
some
feel
people are
you're
like,
confident in
yeah.
some
Yes.
people,
Yeah,
you
some
would
people
say
are-
they
yeah.
could. Some people aren't ready to share their story, or maybe never will.
Yeah.
But then there's people that are like, hey, like, I'm going to share the trip.
Big,
the
bag,
trip,
and
or,
ugly,
I'm
or-
going to
yeah.
share what worked for me, and I want to tell everyone about it.
Yes.
And I'm not ashamed of it, because look at where God has
Yeah.
brought me, and that's how I see you.
Yeah, which is amazing. Okay, yes, I have a final question for our closing segment. What are you having for dinner tonight?
Ooh, I'm going to have whatever my husband's cooking,
Ooh,
because
nice.
it's his turn to cook dinner tonight.
Wow.
We do.
Aw.
Yeah, we do 1 week and 1 week. And so,
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's nice.
Yep. And my husband went to culinary school, so I'm very
Me
spoiled.
too.
Nice.
Aw.
It's the best.
Yeah, so why would you even cook?
Yeah.
You can do the shopping.
I know, my husband's always like, well, we paid, he never makes dinner, so then his joke is always like, well, I paid for the degree. But I mean, I knew how to cook before, but, you know, he's like, I paid for that.
Yeah, she's a good cook.
Yeah. I actually don't know what I'm having for dinner. I do have some pork chops that I need to make up. But, like, we went on vacation, and so I was like, you know, didn't watch anything, didn't work out, and then I'm like, dang, I want to make fried pork chops. But I told myself I was going to be really healthy this week. So, we'll see. But,
We had steak last night. Does that
oh, yum.
we have leftovers we're going to eat for lunch, actually. Late lunch. I don't know. I've frozen chicken. I've frozen pork from Nancy's event still. So I don't know if we're just going to do a stir fry or something easy.
Ooh,
We always
yummy.
have practice tonight. So, yeah. Nothing special.
So none of us know. Awesome. Hope that gave a lot of moms some ideas for dinner.
Or make you feel better about also not knowing what you're making for dinner tonight either. It's okay to not know.
Yeah.
It really helps us. You out there listening, we would love to spread the word. Stories like this, testimonies like this, helpful tips and tricks that when you hear those throughout the podcast that we have. If you know somebody personally, maybe you have a sister, a cousin, a friend that is struggling in sobriety, if you would share that with them, that will help them, that will help us get the word out, help Megan use the testimony for good, and hopefully it continues to the ends of the earth. I feel like we are all called to something, and it's usually bigger than we could ever imagine. And you never know. You never know who you can affect. I think Samantha has a story. There was somebody that followed her that never commented on her, and one day she's ready to give up. And Samantha didn't know who this person was, and she finally reached out to Samantha and said, thank you. Like, on that day, I was ready to take my life. You never know, right? The impact. And, you know, we're so prideful. We like to know all the things, but God has so much up his sleeve for each and every one of us if we just say yes to sharing the hard things and to following his lead and all that. So encouraged today. So anyways, share the podcast. If you can do a rating for us, we would really appreciate that. And thank you.
5 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have anything else, then don't. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, kind of. See you next time, mamas.
Yay.
Yay.
Awesome. We're gonna two-part that because I
Yeah.
like to cut